on. And, because it takes a second for people to kind of like come on and see or whatever. So
Right.
on the game, um, and it's called Black Love or Black Joy, however you want to do it. And so I'm going to give you a category, and you're going to name 5 things in that category within 10 seconds. Hold on a second. I'm sharing to my page. Um, Share now to my page. Okay, there. And so that's it. All you have to do is name 5 things, 10 seconds in that category. Oh, I forgot. There's one little catch. You can't say ah, no filler words. So you just gotta talk. You gotta say the 5 things.
So I'm
You
supposed to
ready?
be looking at something, or are you going to tell me?
I'm gonna tell you the category.
Oh, okay.
You ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so your category is traditional healing methods. You got to name 5 traditional healing methods in 10 seconds. No ums, uhs, ahs, no filler words. Go.
Ifa religion, smudging, sweat lodge, ayahuasca,
Stop.
meditation.
You did good, but I can see that you want to say
I know. I was
You know,
like,
that was
that's not
great
easy.
though.
That's not easy. Because we say and so much. That's a great exercise actually. Because you don't realize you want to say it like every single word.
Uh-huh. You're
And
like
it's really
constantly
hard to.
wanting to say and and everything. Yeah. And I do it all the time. And I'm telling people like in this activity, don't do it.
That's great. That's a great exercise.
Okay, you have to do it one more. I'm trying to fix my necklace.
And it's not until after you see yourself speak that you realize how many times you go, hmm, I, what I think is,
Okay,
people be doing all kinds of twitching and stuff.
you up to doing one more category? I got another category.
Okay.
Uh, as I say, okay, this category, I'm making this up, so you might look at me and tell me like, oh, this category is not correct, and there may not even be 5 different things in this category, but I'm totally making this one up right now. Okay, same thing, 5 things, 10 seconds, no ums, uhs, ahs, no filler words. Your category is the different types of mediums. Tell me the different types of mediumship. Go.
Easy. Artist, dancer, psychic, card reader, a cook, a preacher.
Oh, you did it. You went over.
Mediums are everywhere. You see them everywhere. Actors and actresses, you see them everywhere. They're everywhere.
Really?
Yeah,
Actresses?
everybody, people, I can see when people like go in and then it's not them no more. Like, like
Mhm.
it's basically a meditational state. I happen to be going into meditational state and calling ancestral voices,
Mhm.
but people are constantly going into meditational state doing different things for different purposes. Their purpose is not to call ancestral voices and carry them. They're just like going into state to be an actor, or going into trance to paint a picture, or it's like it's a part of us. It happens all the time. It's just that people are scared to do it and call on ancestral voices.
Wow. And I've said the thing, I was wondering about the whole thing about cooking and the way that I can cook. And I was saying it was ancestral. And you never
Yeah,
said that to me. Like that's mediumship. This is
yeah,
the first time I'm hearing.
hmm,
And
yeah,
particularly because I've never been taught. But like
yeah. You're channeling. Hmm.
I just feel like I'm just channeling.
Yep. That's a spiritual act. And that's why some people's food will make you sick. It can be all a good ingredient and their energy is off and it makes you sick. And other people, their food is like medicine, and it can be the simplest thing. And you're like, this is so delicious because their energy is in the food.
Put a pin in that. Let me introduce you. I think we need to start right there. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I am based in Muskogee Territory, which is also known as Atlanta, Georgia. And my guest today is my sister friend that I love so much because every single time I have a conversation with her, I learn so much. Zawadi Powell, who is a medium, and she is a spiritual light worker. Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Oh, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. We got to start here with the food thing. I remember growing up. So, y'all, we are talking about healing through ancestral connections. I think this is really important. I remember growing up, and there were certain people's house that you go to, just learning like certain people's house too. And your elders might tell you, particularly your female elders, like your grandmother or whatever, don't eat her food.
Yes.
I mean, particularly,
That's
I don't
so
know, something about potato
interesting.
salad, because like I think you can hide some stuff in there. Like, don't you eat nothing from her. And lots of conversations about like people's energy and okay, you can eat this person's food, but don't eat that person's food. And it was always around their energy.
Right.
And so talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to tie that into kind of the idea of ancestral connection.
Yeah, so what we're starting to see now is a lot of people are becoming Reiki masters, channeling Reiki, figuring out how to channel it into their own bodies and then channel it to other people in order to heal them. And so we're starting to accept the actuality of energy as a physical form, as a wave. And so when we start to accept that, with Reiki, then we can start to think about it in all the other areas of our life as well, that when you're cooking, there may be energy coming from your hands, right? Because to be attuned with Reiki means that you have enhanced something that naturally occurs anyway in human beings. So when we're cooking, we can be emitting energy from our hands. And if our energy, the vibration is not in agreement or not positive, or has some kind of negative element to it that's not good for someone, then if we're cooking the food, we can be putting that energy in the food, and the food can make someone sick, or it can cause the person to absorb that vibration and start to not feel so well, or feel depressed, or whatever you put in the food. And so that's why when we're cooking, we should cook with intentions of love. We should cook. And we used to also see like, what we pray over the food, right? Before we eat it, right? People pray, bless the hands that made this food, it's like we're constantly acknowledging that energy exists and that we are interacting with it, but we still somewhere in our head think that it's a myth. We still somewhere in our head are like, oh, that's not real. That's just something the grandparents used to do. But I think it has happened to me before where I ate someone's food, which looked delicious, and then something just was off, and I just was like, I don't think I ever want to eat their food again, because there really is an aspect of it. And then another example is when one person cooks something and gives a recipe to someone else, and the other person makes the recipe, but it doesn't come the same.
That is about energy.
And there's no recipe for energy. There's no recipe for someone's vibration.
Yeah. Now that reminds me of my daughters were in the kitchen cooking sometime last year, and one of them was just being not helpful, and her energy was just real stank. And I always would tell them, like, my rule is no cooking with bad energy. We're not arguing over food. We're not like saying anything negative, or you got to go. You can't be in the kitchen with negative energy. And she didn't want to listen. They want to do the meal themselves. She didn't want to listen. The whole meal was terrible. The entire meal was terrible. And I mean, that's really sad, but I mean, that's the reality of it. It was just, nothing came out right. Yeah. And I tried to say, like, look, I remember my grandmother saying that, and it, like, don't do that. Like, I remember that was like a really big thing. Like you said, like prayer, praying over meals, and then like not being argumentative or having negative energy. And I think about that because that's something ancestrally that's been passed down for me. And it's a connection that I have from my grandmothers, not just one, but both of my grandmothers. And it's something that I continue to talk about with my own daughter. And so I want us to kind of just go into this idea of ancestral connections. And for you, why would you say that having connections with your ancestors is important?
So there is a disconnect that we have, being colonized people, being people who were, taken from our culture, taken from our traditions, taken from our lands, from our griots. There is a disconnect. And in order for us to truly understand who we are and what belongs to us and what we innately do in order to be well, I feel like a confusion will preside. And I think that we have done a lot of work as a people to uncover the history of things and to study, even the psychology of things is becoming, really amazing and powerful, to start to understand, culturally and anthropologically. And I think there's a wave now of people who are trying to understand spiritually. I think there's a wave of people who are saying, okay, we found our history documented, year by year. But now, where's the emotion of it? Where's, the piece that's organic, the piece that, is not written, the piece that truly individually belongs to me. And I think when we start to connect spiritually and we start to understand, again, the actuality of energy, the fact that we do connect to a line that is unseen, that there is information available to us that's not written, that there are experiences and things that belong to us that no one has documented or no one can tell us, and that we can just access it through the ethers. I think that there's a part of us that will be returned, and that something will click into place that will heal so many things, so many wrongs that have been done to our people and to ourselves, and really bring us back to a space of wholeness, not going back to who we used to be, but moving forward into who we're really supposed to be, and integrating all that we know now and all that we knew in the past in order to move forward into the future, in a positive way.
And okay, so I got to tie this into cooking. And that energy piece, because I'm sorry, that's just my thing, y'all. So like Black food ways and cooking and this whole ancestral thing, because I promise you I did not understand that for me. And so it sounds like what you're saying is the energy of cooking and caring for other folks, that energy can be passed down through your ancestors, and so you can then do something that no one's ever taught you. It hasn't been written down. It's just, it comes through that energy. Is that what you're saying?
So those of us who believe in the Akashic Records and sort of like a spiritual internet, we believe that there is information available from our ancestors, that there is data banks or people who are still telling stories and ways to access things that that cannot really be fully explained. And I think people through meditation or through, forging connections with their ancestors can receive recipes, can start to, receive, even skills or sensibilities or understandings of things that are innately part of ourselves, right? Because we're descended from a line, we're descended genetically, we're descended spiritually from a line. And so, these things can resurface and we rediscover them as if we always knew them.
You said the Akashic Records. For people that don't know, what are the Akashic Records?
Akashic Records is like a system of belief that there's like a file for each person and for the entire world, where every single thing that has ever happened in eternity is available. And that there are people who practice tapping into the Akashic Records in order to find what information is available to you personally. So it's a type of reading that people do. And it has to do with the belief that every truth, is available in these records.
Okay. Is the untruth in the record?
Everything that's happened. I'm sorry. Everything that's happened. Okay. Everything that, I guess, every angle of the truth, probably, because the truth can be really complicated. And again, my disclaimer, I don't do Akashic record readings, but I do believe that the Akashic records exist.
Okay.
And so you should research it, because my
Mhm.
definition is not all inclusive.
I remember you the first person that actually said anything about the Akashic. Maybe I heard you and Daoud say something about it. And then I was like, what is this? And I started looking at stuff online. I was like, oh, this is an interesting concept. I hadn't even heard of it. I mean, not put in that way. I've heard of the concept in other things, but not put in that way. Because it's almost like I feel like I can kind of equate it to getting and reading an Ifa. Because it's a comprehensive knowledge bank of everything past, present, and future. Is that kind of similar or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is what we see, right? In different cultures, the same concept exists, but it has a different name. People explain it maybe a little differently, but it's we always find all of these similarities across cultures. And that sort of, for me, that confirms that, okay, this is a thing.
I heard that. I see Benicia said that she believes the whole thing, what you were saying. She said she believes it wholeheartedly because she's been anointed to cook for large groups and she's never had any formal training. Yeah, so I know because I've been to her house and she just will cook. Yeah, so that's really powerful. What how do people connect with their ancestors? Like if they've never done it, they're just listening for the first time and they're like, well, what do I do? Like, because these people are dead. How do I connect with them? What would you
Right.
say?
So that's a question. So I mean, there's so many different ways to connect with ancestors. From a simple, telling of their story to your children, right? Of celebrating them in some way. We're talking about cooking, so we made grandma. This is great grandma's recipe. This is how she used to make it. Our family has been eating this for generations. And then up to hanging pictures of them on the wall, just celebrating them, researching your line, finding the names, going to places where your family used to reside, sort of communing with the energy there. And then some people are shrining, so we're put a white cloth with some ancestors pictures, a candle, a glass of water, some white flowers, in the Ifa tradition. And then going every day, to light the candle and commune with your ancestors, to sit and meditate, to see if you receive messages, to look at their pictures and see, are their expressions changing? Do you hear them? Some people hear their voices. I can walk by them and they can be like, "Hey, girl, come here," and I'm like, "Really? Okay, I'm busy right now, Grandma. Can I?" So it's like it varies for different people, and I think the main idea is just don't forget them. With the shrines, we can get really intricate. Sometimes we do ancestor feasts, so I will try to listen for them to tell me what feast do they want, and we have to agree, right? Because I'm not making pig feet, guys. I'm not going to do it, right? So I will do fried fish for you, right? So we're doing fried fish, and we're doing fried dumpling, and we're doing collard greens, and we're doing some yam, and we're doing the different things they used to eat, and then I'm laying out a plate for them, with maybe there's a rose and maybe there's a candle, and I made a really pretty tablecloth, and it's like I set it with silver, and like just to celebrate them. And then me and my kids, we talk about them and we celebrate them, and we we'll say a prayer and we'll say thank you to them, and we will lay this feast out, with a 7-day candle, stay overnight. And then usually we put some music on and we have a party and we celebrate, because most of our people were dancing people, right? They commune with music. And so my belief is that they came and they sat with us at the table and they had a feast, and then we had a family party, and we're all happy. We're feeling love. We're feeling light. We're feeding our energy to the loved ones that are not seen. And in that way, they're able to be stronger and bless us in this realm.
So you said two things. Okay, I want to, I always got to go back to the when you hear stuff that's not really there because me being a psychologist, so we got to come to that. We'll go to that in a little bit. But you said something I think is interesting, because I have transitioned my belief over time. I probably shouldn't say this because my ancestor shrine is right here. So if I say it in front of them, they're like, "Oh, really? Okay." So when I first started out, I was a vegan at the time. I'm no longer a vegan. And so then I was like trying to get my ancestors vegan stuff. They didn't eat vegan stuff. I mean, they ate vegetables, but they were not vegan. So they was like,
Like you. I don't know what is this. Some kind of soy plastic stuff.
And 20 something years later, I have really transitioned. And so I remember being with a sister friend whose mother ran a restaurant here in Atlanta, and we went to go to feed her. We went to the graveyard and left some food there for her mother. And she was trying to, she didn't want to make a pork chop, but that was like her mama's famous thing. I was like, "Girl, you better make that pork chop for your mama." And so as I've gotten older and just really more mature, I have these particular pots, because I don't eat pork chops, but I have pots. And if it needs to go down like that, then that's how it needs to go down. Now, I think I agree with you. I'm not gonna cook. I would not cook any pig's feet, because I don't know nothing about that. Or chitlins and stuff like that. I can't do all of that, but like I can see a pork chop. Like I'm like, okay, they ate pork chop, give them pork chop. They drank.
Yeah, luckily my family did not eat a whole lot of pork. They were definitely fish people. Most
Got
of
it.
my family comes from the seaside, and that might be why I'm also not very much into meat, because it hasn't really traditionally been eaten for many generations. Little things like Spam, or like Vienna sausages, like
Sorry, my
little
face
things,
was like,
and I do that sometimes. I will, sometimes get him some little sausages or something, but for my grandfather. But
so like
yeah, I'm
Vienna
glad that
sausages and
they
Chinese
take the
sausage.
compromise, because I really don't want to cook pork chops, and they are happy with fried fish.
Well,
But
and
I think, yeah, if you receive the message and you're okay with it, then work it out for them, because it's a special thing to do, for your family.
and fortunately, mine don't like necessarily ask for that, but like I'll get like biscuits and syrup. One time I cracked up because I was making some grits and I don't hear anything. I don't hear words. I don't think that would be good for me. So, but I just get this intense knowing, and so then I was making some grits, and they was like, bring us down some grits too." What you doing?" I was like, "All right, my bad. Let me bring some grits."
That's a good way to explain it, like an intense knowing, because that really is. It's like a feeling that you get, and there is no voice. There's just an energy, and you can
Yeah.
just feel it. And that's a great way to explain that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when you were saying it, it sounds like you're actually hearing a voice. Or
Occasionally, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
occasionally I will hear a voice, particularly my Native American grandmothers. They talk very loud. Um, and and I had confirmation. So, I'm constantly looking for confirmation, right? Because I don't want you to think I'm crazy, and I don't want to be crazy. And if I am crazy, I want someone to tell me, that I'm crazy. So I can solve it, because it's better to live in reality, right? And so there was a grandmother, and I was back and forth with her, and we were talking, and sometimes it was pleasant and sometimes it was not. And then my cousin calls me a week later and says, "Grandma said to stop calling her. She's busy right now." I saw her in a dream. And it was the same grandmother who I was back and forth with. And so, inevitably, like, if you're looking for confirmation that you're not crazy, or that, some sign that, this is really happening, because you don't really believe it, it will be delivered to you for you to know that they're really speaking.
Okay, but then how do you know on the other end? So this is where I stand. I got to go back to them when you talk about hearing stuff, because I'm a psychologist. How would you know, like, okay, that's not ancestors. There's something wrong. You need to go see somebody like me.
For me, if the conversation becomes dysfunctional and starts to cause disruption in my life,
Mhm.
and if there's no confirmation of it, like there's no, it's not working on my behalf, right? Because if my ancestors are speaking to me and they are good ancestors, then I should be seeing improvements in my life. I should have additional happiness. I should feel, a sense of joy. The messages should pan out. There should be truth in them. There should be, a way to fact check. Like if you hear a voice that says, we used to live in Virginia, and then you go to Virginia and you look in the records, and yes, indeed, they did live there. Then you're like, oh, it was my ancestor speaking to me. You always, whenever you hear voices, you always have to consider every time you hear them that you may be crazy. I think that people who hear voices should always say the first step that I always take is I heard a voice. Does that make sense? Am I crazy? Did I imagine it? Is it really, authentically an ancestral message? And then why should I believe it? Why should I interact with it? Why should I accept it as a message? Because if I don't constantly do that fact check and I don't constantly try to, find some normalcy in it or some logical train in it, then I can easily be crazy because I'll be responding to any thing I think I hear, and I can start imagining that I'm hearing things, or I can, I mean, it's very important in people who can hear voices. You really should stay connected to mental health professionals and priests, and be actively practicing a religion, and be constantly monitoring yourself and talking to family and friends about what you're experiencing, because this is not a known phenomenon in this culture. And we do have to have a support system. And you can be hearing voices and still be crazy. It's in fact, again, I often say the two things coexist. And so it's when you think you're not crazy that you have a problem, because I mean, inevitably we're all crazy in one way or another, right? I mean, that's you know, being challenged to perfect yourself and to correct, any psychological or mental issues that you have, is just a part of our life path, right? And so if you're hearing voices, then that may be a challenge, a part of your life path that needs to be corrected, or it may be a gift that needs to be refined. And you have to constantly consider both of those dynamics could be happening at the same time.
Wow. Everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon. My guest today is Zawadi Powell. She is a medium and spiritual light worker. And if you have questions or comments and just anything that you want to say or ask questions to Zawadi, then definitely put those in the chat. Join us in this conversation. Zawadi, you're saying something that's interesting as I'm thinking about it, because, and I don't think I've heard you characterize it that way. You're saying basically, and I'm not going to use the word crazy, but if
Right. I realized like halfway through, I was like, "Oh, that's a bad
that's
word."
all right. That's okay. That's okay.
Sorry,
I'm just not gonna use it. You use it. I'm not gonna use it. But if you're hearing and seeing stuff that's not really there, then you should always be questioning that. So that's kind of what our term would be: reality testing. Is this real? Is there objective evidence? But then also to so is there objective evidence to show that what you're experiencing is true? But then also that you should have a team of support. So you should have a mental health professional. You should have a spiritual worker. You should be part of some type of spiritual community. You should be getting feedback from your family. And you should be examining what you're experiencing to figure out, is it improving your life? So if it's not improving your life and it's causing disruption and chaos in those relationships, then that's probably an indicator that what you're seeing and hearing is not okay. And in my terms, I would say it's probably a sign of organic mental illness. See, I'm always trying to figure out, like, what's the sign?
Right. And it can be a sign of organic mental illness, or it can be a sign of bad spirits around you.
And
But
a
in one way
combination
or
of both.
another, you have to turn it off. You have to get away from it or make it stop, because it's not a blessing in this case. It's gone awry.
Now talk about this in terms of like ancestors. Like, so let's say, I mean, lots of times when we think of ancestors as people of African descent, we think about it in a very positive way. Like I was descended from these folks, and I have pictures of my grandparents and great grandparents and things like that. Is there a point where you may have some ancestors in your line where you're like, don't connect with them folks, not them people?
I have actually done work with people who did not have good recent ancestors. Again, after slavery, after colonialism, there's a lot of dysfunction and pain and broken people who really need to be healed or sent away. I had one spirit who was. Oh, so let me go back to that. So those who have recent ancestors who were traumatized. It's very common here working with people of African American descent, or also people from colonized West Africa. And sometimes we have to, in our prayers, in looking to connect with ancestors, we have to say the enlightened ancestors, the resurrected ancestors, the ancestors who have, peace of mind and who are not, harmed. Those who sit on a council, we have to specify exactly what ancestors we're talking about, because in their case, we can feel that the recent ancestors are not really in a space to give advice. A lot of us know, right? Like we know, like, there's a lot of alcoholism, a couple of generations back, and there's, maybe some crack use or some deep depression, a lot of times schizophrenia, misunderstood spiritual gifts. I'm seeing a lot of people of Native American descent whose family is dealing with bipolar schizophrenia stuff. And I really believe that it has to do with that tradition having been a highly spiritual tradition and not being continued after colonization, after decimation. And I think that it's really important to say what ancestors you're speaking to, and also to remember that we do have ancestors, going way, way, way back, to ancient times, Mesopotamia, Persia, Egypt, the Ghana Empire, the Bantu Empire, just the Olmecs. We have ancestors that are, worldwide, that are not from this empire or this society. And so we have to sometimes tap into those in order to really feel connected. And some of us will be drawn, to the artwork of those realms, of those times. We'll be drawn to the history. We'll want to go to that part of the country because, in some way it connects to us. There was one girl we spoke to recently where she found out that her blood type belonged to a group of rebels who lived in, let me not say it wrong, I think it was Spain, but they were a darker skinned, small people who lived in Spain, and they were indigenous to Spain. And they were outcasted and really slaughtered, similar to the Native Americans here. And so her blood type is like one of the rarest in the world. And when she researched it, she found out that these people were where the blood type belonged to. And they were there, and some of them had been transported to South America, probably in slavery. And so, we can find so many interesting connections to our ancestors besides our recent ones, or besides just 3 generations back. And so we have to remember that we belong to a vast world and a vast history, and that our spirits originate, somewhere, way deeper than, just the recent ancestors that we know of.
So making these connections, how would you say that they're helpful? I don't know, like for yourself, how have they been helpful for you to connect with ancestors, recent ones or ones that are more ancient?
Yeah, so quite obviously, We all know, right, that it helps our self-esteem, right? Like,
Mhm.
it makes us feel special. Like, oh, I'm Egyptian,
People
I
are
belong to
vegan.
the pharaohs, I'm not actually descended from slavery. I'm actually descended from the Mali Empire. It's like, like we need this stuff, right? Because it makes us feel, more happier and more confident, and it gives us sort of a path to identity that, for us African Americans, to not look only at the transatlantic slave trade and the horrors of that as part of our identity, but to say we connect to other things. Also, we can look at culturally. There are little Africanisms or innuendos that are passed down the family line, behaviors, that come from the cultures that we came from. And when we start to find those cultures, then we can sort of make these behaviors stronger, or we can celebrate them, or we can recognize the positive patterns that exist, that because oftentimes the Africanisms that we saved were the ones that saved us, right? They were the
Yeah.
things that gave us strength or kept us going, in these difficult situations. And so culturally, it's very good to connect with our ancestors, because it heals us and it gives us more tools. It gives us something to identify that is stronger than just the American culture, or a culture that you sort of happened into and or were forced into, and
Mhm.
and
You
doesn't
just show up
necessarily
here.
always accept or support you. Um,
Mhm.
and then by physiologically, I remember I met a nutritionist, an anthropological nutritionist, may he rest in peace, Dr. Davidson, who passed away. I
Mhm.
recently found out, had studied how different foods affect different ethnicities, and
Mhm.
realized that as African people and people of Native American descent, we should not be eating wheat. That wheat was a part of our colonization, that they went to the Aztecs and intentionally removed their quinoa and burned the fields and planted
Mhm.
wheat as part of their colonization, because the Aztecs culturally believed that quinoa was a power food, and that it connected them to their ancestors, and that it was a living element that gave them spiritual power. And so wheat was implemented as part of a colonization practice. And he felt that biologically wheat does not agree with us, because we are not wheat eating peoples. And so he said, if you are of African Native American descent, you should be eating yam, cassava. You should be eating rice, maybe. You should be eating corn if you're of Native American descent.
Mhm.
You should be eating quinoa, if you're of South American descent. Like we had to rediscover what grains agree with our body in order to prevent these illnesses that we keep getting from eating this colonized food that was given to us, because we were basically cattle, and that's what they had from their country, and that was the cheapest thing for them to import, and they wanted to take our traditions and our culture away from us, in order to subjugate us. And so knowing our ancestry and knowing where we come from and what our people used to eat is another powerful thing that not only affects us mentally and psychologically, but physically, can heal us and can make us to be our best selves.
Wow. Okay. Woo. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. Okay. Let me start here. Okay. I remember years ago, and I was probably midway into kind of my ancestry research, and I found this on my paternal side. I found my grandmother's father, which my grandmother died and did not know. She thought her father was white,
Mm.
and she did not know where his family was from. She thought he was actually from a different country, but
Wow.
her parents were married. And I remember just growing up thinking, like, how in the early 1900s did this white man marry this black woman? And
Mm.
it just didn't sound right. And I found it, like, just being persistent. And this is like, again, not hearing voices, but waking up one morning and having this intense need to look in this ancestral database. And I found my great grandparents' marriage certificate. Come to find out, and I have a picture of my great grandfather. He looks white, but he's actually Black, and it said it on the marriage certificate. So I traced their family lines. I'm the first person in the family that finds my great grandfather and knows this. And I traced the family line, and I realized through his line that I actually descend from people that were never enslaved. They were
Wow.
absolutely never enslaved. Not only were they not enslaved, here's the wild kicker part, is that they actually came from England. Don't ask me why there's some Black people was in England. They came from England in the early 1800s and migrated, of all places, to Charleston, South Carolina.
Whoa! They had no clue what was going on, obviously.
So I can legit, on the early census of the United States, I can actually see my family members on both sides of that family, and they're descending down to current day, and they've never been enslaved. And I remember just being flabbergasted by all of this and saying to my friend, do you know I descend from people that have never been enslaved? And she said, you move through the world like you descend from people that have never been enslaved. And I was like, oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Just finding that piece. I mean, and I've found some wild stories, but just finding that piece
and
of information.
I want to say that there are those who are also proud to be descended from those who survived slavery, because they don't walk around saying my family was never enslaved, and because there's some parts of my family that I can point to for that as well. But I just don't want to ever negate the strength and the power of those who survived slavery, and the way that they walk in the world, and the way that they have a special devotion. We have a special devotion. We have a drive that is just they're not, no one is ever going to subjugate us that way again. And so that was a powerful experience for our people, and it has created a really amazing tradition in the world, in the way that we move.
Well, and here's an interesting thing that I think around saying that, because in a lot of the parts of my family, so I'm just talking about one line of my family, a lot of parts of my family, they survive enslavement, they survive the First Nations people, so they survive Europeans coming to this country and genocide and taking their land. And on the flip of it, when we think about ancestral connection, it never crossed my mind that I was descended from people,
or that story even exists, right? Because they tell us this blanket story that makes us believe that everything was always, in every situation, this is what happened, and that's never the case.
Exactly.
And I have I wanted to share. We were showing our pictures of our ancestors. I have a picture of my ancestors that I wanted to share, and these were
wait, put it up a little bit. Okay.
These were my ancestors from St. Kitts, and I love them because they're like a beautiful love story. She was actually an honorary white. She was descended from a Scottish woman named Clementine McLaughlin, who was not a slave driver, and who married a Black man and had a baby and raised her children, Black children, on the island. And she fell in love with Hezekiah, who is beautiful, right? He looks like Michael Jordan. And her family, who had some status in the island because of their being descended from a Scottish woman, because of the colorism, they were kind of, not necessarily in high approval of her choice of men. But she loved him so deeply that she stayed with him even when they left for the Americas, and she had 15 children. And Hezekiah, my great grandfather, we call him Papa, handled his business and fed all 15 of his children and the neighbors' children.
Wow.
By driving a horse and carriage, which I think he was delivering maybe some bootleg liquor.
And that's what I'm talking about. Like when ancestral connection, like when you think about that. So when you think about, okay, so let's think about it this way. And I see Regina is Olayeye Smith. She's saying she's loving the conversation. So thank you. Thank you for that. I think it's really interesting because we can get caught in respectability politics and be like, oh well, my family were numbers runners, or they was, doing bootleg liquor, and then you get all like, oh well, that's bad. They were surviving.
Mm-hmm.
They knew how to make it do what it do to survive, and I think that that's dope.
They
So
just gotta eat.
you driving a horse and carriage and you selling bootleg liquor. I mean, that's what people did. And so when you look at the Kennedys, when we think about it in the United States, when we look at the Kennedys, look at how he was making money bootlegging, like the daddy, granddaddy Kennedy making money bootlegging. And so we will praise that, but then
let's deal with the fact that had Papa not done what he did, I would not be able to do what I do. Right? We give thanks to our ancestors because whatever they did, whether we agree with it or we don't, is what eventually led to us doing what we do. And so his 15 children flourished, right? Because they never spent a day hungry. There was so much laughter in that house. He loved his wife. That's why he kept giving her baths and massaging her feet, and then she'd be pregnant again. He loved his children. Everybody was beautiful, right? And these people made beautiful families, and the families were stable. And we have, engineers and architects, and we have, teachers and lawyers. I mean, that family just exploded with success. And we have hardworking men who support their wives and take care of their children. And this, continued down the lines. And so I was able to get my education, and I was able to be, pretty stable, mentally stable. And I was able to buy my house and raise my kids. And now I'm stable enough where I can manage this spiritual gift that I want to carry, right? Because had Papa done something different, then I would not be like this right now. I would not be happy. I would not be serving my purpose. And so that's why we have to celebrate them and thank them, for our life, because had Mama not said, you know what, I don't care what you say, I love this Black man, he's the world, and I'm gonna follow him to my dying day. Had she not said that, I would not be here, right? I don't know if I would exist, right? So I'm so grateful to them for the love that they had and the dedication and the hard work, because it's what made me, and that we have to praise them, and we can't judge them, because the times are different. They may think we're crazy. Like, why you sit there at that screen all day? Don't you have any friends? Right now we sitting here talking to a screen. I don't even know.
Let me show you mine. Okay, so this is my most recent. Wait, let me put it over there. This is my most recent one with my great grandparents. This is on my mother's side. And I never thought, I'm so proud of this picture. I've had it for maybe 2 weeks now. I never thought that I would see pictures of them. And I have been looking so hard for.
Let me see her again. I want to see her again because I see your face.
So wait a minute. Let me see. Okay.
Oh, wow.
That's my great grandmother. Her name is Naomi. And my great grandfather, his name is George. And the thing is, with Naomi, I had been looking for her. One of the reasons that I knew you was real, because I knew that she was she has First Nations blood. Of course, she's got African blood and First Nations blood in her. And I knew, but you didn't know that. And first time I met you and you did a reading, and Adekemi said, and I was asking specifically about her. And you looked down and looked up, and Adekemi said, oh, she's got Native blood. And I remember saying, oh shit. And I was thinking I shouldn't be cursing in front of the spirit.
It's amazing because so many of us are descended from First Nations people, and it became taboo in our communities to say, oh, I got, Indian in me, because then it means you're putting on airs. But actually, there's a book that's written that shows that many of the features that African Americans have that we attribute to Africa came from First Nations people who integrated in. And I actually had an ancestor who was murdered for passing for Black. She was a First Nations woman, and she was passing for Black, and they burned her.
Oh my
And
God.
so I think that to be First Nations at that time was even worse than being a slave, even worse than being Black. And so I think many of them integrated in and passed for Black, which I had never heard of before I heard that story.
Okay, well, here's the other thing. So, okay, so there's two pieces that I want to tell you about that. One is that as I've been looking over the years, because the only thing I heard was that my people were Black. I never heard anything different,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't until I found my grandmother on the census listed as a Native American, and I went to my aunt and asked her about it, who's on. She's an in-law because she's on the other side of the family. She was like, "Oh, I think I knew," and I'm like, "Well, it'd be nice if y'all had told a sister. I didn't know anything about this." And I knew my grandmother, but I never heard any of these stories. And so as I have looked more and more in all the records on ancestry.com, my folks are like they're clearly Black and Native American. Like when you look,
Mm-hmm.
you open up stuff and it's like, oh, they lived in Choctaw territory, and there's like all of these records that show who they are, and
Wow.
nobody ever said anything to
Yeah, it
me.
wasn't safe. I think it wasn't safe in certain areas. It
It's
wasn't
so
safe.
interesting.
Because if you think about it, the Africans were captives that were bought for, a business endeavor. The Native Americans were enemies. They were fighting wars, with each other over territory. And so once the wars were, done and the Europeans won through germ warfare, they were seen as enemies, I think, for many, many generations.
Wow. What I can tell you is, so my great grandfather in this picture, I found his World War I draft card. So this is like 1917, 1918 maybe.
Wow.
And on his draft card, where it says like race or whatever color, like usually they'll say like colored or mulatto, or you know, you might even get Negro. This this brother put on there African. He wrote African. I was like, just to have that little connection of like being able to see this draft card, see
That's
his
unbelievable.
handwriting.
So that tells you he had the same attitude that you have. Was not behaving, was not was not obeying the broader society.
I mean, can you imagine what that means? And I think to me, that's the power of the idea of an ancestral connection. When you get the political statement of this man in 1918, when he
Mhm.
says, I'm an African,
Right. Yeah,
that's
that's
deep.
amazing. That's amazing.
And to
Wow,
see
God
that with
bless
my own
him.
eyes, I'm like, whoa. My grandmother's like 9 months old because he writes down he's married and and my grandma was the other
Mm.
oldest child. She's got a 9-month-old baby. And he says, I'm an African. I'm not a Negro. I'm not colored. I'm not
Wow.
mulatto. None of that. I'm an
Right.
African.
And that's powerful because, like, I mean, I think that we forget that so many of the things that end up being a movement or end up being like a huge, political rally
Mm-hmm.
are sort of birthed in the masses little by little by like one
Yeah.
person's statement, and it sort of
Mm-hmm.
hangs around, and one person says it, and then and so like it also gives power to even the conversation we're having now or the
Mm-hmm.
conversations we'll have tomorrow, because it's like we think nobody's listening, or we think we're just talking to our friends, right? But eventually, like, these things can catch on and become like an idea somewhere along the line, because
Mm-hmm.
someone who has influence might pick it up and start to spread it. So it's so interesting because there was probably a whole group of people who were before their time and who had realized, he was obviously talking to other people about this too. And so it was like that movement was brewing, even back then, and he was
Uh-huh.
part of it.
And I would have loved to, I think for me, the connection pieces, I would have loved to know the stories. Like, why was he saying that he was an African? He had to be in, something was going on with him for
Mhm.
him to make that kind of statement. I so would have loved those stories. I wish they had been passed down. And I mean, that's one of the things that you said at the beginning is one of the ways to make those connections is to be able to talk about the stories of your ancestors and pass them
Yeah.
down in the generations.
Yeah, a huge part of our culture that has been lost is the oral history, the
Mhm.
griots, of ancient Africa and of the First Nations people, those who held the stories of every generation, every family line, everything that had occurred from our perspective. We're starting to rebuild that, through the books we write and the stories we tell and the way we perceive things and the movies we make. We're starting to reclaim our story, and we have to pass it on to our children. We have to, allow our children to remember who we are and what we do. And, back then it was so intricate that like the griots knew like, okay, this family had a rift with this family. And so, a couple generations down the line, maybe the two kids met and they start having an argument, and they're like, oh, of course you're going to argue because your great grandparents never got along, and so, it's like just, I don't know. It's fascinating when you think about, like the cultural tools that were set up back then, and how right now we're sort of in a free fall. Like we're sort of existing with the definitions that have been given to us and trying our best, to recreate ourselves in an authentic way.
Would you say that your ancestors actually look for you also? Like while you're looking for them, they look for you?
I like to believe so.
Okay.
I think different ancestors are different, right? So me, once I pass away and I am an ancestor, my children will be trying to get rid of me because I plan to haunt them if I can.
Hey, listen here.
They're gonna be like, "Mommy, shut up! Mommy, shut up! Don't say it. I know he's cheating. I know it. I know. Just be quiet, mommy. That boy ain't no good." I think that different relationships with each ancestor is different. And I bought a picture of my papa because I believe that he walks very, very close to me. I have actually seen him before. In my kids were getting in the car and we were late for school, and I was screaming and yelling, and you guys are always late, blah, blah, just being negative and toxic. And I looked in the car and I said, there's a man in my driver's seat. Somebody's trying to kidnap my kids. And I got really scared and I didn't know what to do. And I was frozen for a minute. And then I said, I recognize him. And I realized it was the vision of my papa. And he raised his finger at me and he said, and I said, "Whoa, okay, I'm sorry. I'll stop screaming. I'm going to calm down. I'm not going to abuse them, because verbal abuse is a thing, right? We do it, because we lose control of ourselves. And so I calmed down and I was kind of freaked out, for the rest of the day. Like my papa came back from the dead because I'm screaming at my kids too much. And so I think that he's very active. I feel him all the time. I feel so connected to him. I look to him as sort of my standard for how a father and a husband is supposed to act. I look for stories about him. I give him gifts every day. I just love him, and I believe that he loves me too. And so our relationship is very, very special. But then I have other ancestors like my grandmother, who I was talking about before, who she's busy. She doesn't want me to bother her. I believe she loves me. I don't know what she's doing, in the spirit realm. But when I talk to her, I don't feel any feedback. I don't feel any connection. I don't feel the need to seek her. And she's also someone who had a lot of trauma in life. She was descended from the First Nations people. And did experience a lot of trauma. And so I assume she must be healing. So I pray for her and I include her in my prayers, but I don't, go and say, hey, good morning, or, try to connect or see if she has any opinions about things that are going on in my life, or try to use divination tools to get her to speak to me. Because I just feel like, okay, I got the message and she's not here with me. She may be with someone else in the family, she may be somewhere busy doing something that I don't know what it is. So I think it's different for different people. And then there are people who sometimes when I meet them, there doesn't appear to be many ancestors around them at all. Or as we mentioned before, some of their ancestors have been so traumatized and so, stressed out and mentally ill that they're not interacting, or they're maybe in limbo. They haven't ascended to the realm. So there's a lot of different scenarios, and it's really very individual, case by case, which is why we do the work we do, so that people can uncover what's going on in their own ancestral realm and start to repair it or build it stronger.
So what do you what would someone do? And I know we're like right at the end of our time. That time went by so quick. Now, but you gotta be curious. So what would someone do, or like how would they find out whether or not they have ancestors around them? Because you said I never even heard of that. It never even crossed my mind, the whole idea like somebody may not have people around them. Because my folks be here.
Yeah, call me and get a reading so we can see.
By contacting you, how?
My website is higherassistance.com, and we can do a reading to see if your ancestors are around you. You can also, kind of start to pray or shrine or look for them, search for them. Maybe when you find them, they will start to commune with you more. A lot of times we have signs or we feel things. You might be cooking, like you said. Let's bring it right back around, right? You can be cooking, and then the ingredients of a recipe will come to you, and that's how you know that ancestors are around you. So I mean, it happens in a lot of different ways. But yeah, everybody's spiritual connection and gifts and way of communing is different. So I can't really give a cookie cutter way of knowing whether they're around. You kind of just know or you don't.
Fair enough. But you also gave a reasonable solution of, that people could certainly come and get a reading from you, and you'd be able to help them with that. For people that now, do you do readings only in person, or do you do them virtually, or like how does that work?
So I do half and half. I do travel to New York and Atlanta. I need to come back to Atlanta to do readings, and also Jamaica. I do readings by phone, and probably half of my readings that I do are by phone. People actually really like that because you go into a space that's not visual, and you are able to really focus and tap in. So the phone readings are just as good as the in-person readings. And you can book the phone readings online. The in-person readings, we have to arrange them if I'm traveling.
Got it. And they're not cheap. Let me just let you know. So it's an investment in your time. It's worth every penny, but it's an investment in your time. When I first was getting a reading from Zawadi, I thought it was going to be like $30. Then when she said the price, I was like, but then after I got it, I gave that money to her so quick. I was like, that's a steal.
Yeah. My cowrie shell readings start at $71. I do groups at times that can be $50 per person or $35 per person. And then my spiritual readings, where you would connect with a spirit guide, my spirit guide are $221, and then in person is $250. So those are my prices.
Yeah. Zawadi is amazing.
But I encourage you also to explore on your own, as we mentioned, research at ancestry.com or on, in the records in your city or the city where your people lived, and build a shrine, put pictures up, collect things that remind you of them, cook their favorite meals, go to the place where they used to live, do your own exploration, because ultimately it is your journey and it is your connection. And, people like me, we're sort of like an amp, or a tool that can make things even stronger, but you have to build the organic connection yourself first before anything else can work properly.
So that's interesting when you say that, because one of the things that you said when I asked about my great grandmother that I just showed you the picture of is, besides the fact that you told me that she had First Nations blood, which I knew at that point, the message that came through Adekemi was, she's around you. She said, keep looking for her and you will eventually find something. And that was 4 years ago. It took me 4 years, and I kept
Wow.
looking, and I got that picture. 4 years to get that picture.
Wow, that's so touching. She must be
Yeah.
so happy because when we find them and when we put things together, we also heal them. And there was actually a woman who her
Mhm.
ancestors sort of alerted her that she had some land, and
Mhm.
she went and found the land. And it's like that whole process of like unearthing what belonged to them, or what they were about, or who they were, or what their names were, is like a healing process for them as well, because it brings
Mhm.
the family legacy back into
Yeah.
the reality, and it gives power to them on in the spirit realm.
Yeah. What I did is, and the way that I found the picture is that my grandmother's brother died in 1976, and I was a little girl at the time, so I don't have any memory of him at all. And by the time I got older, I know that my family is big, but I just didn't know anybody. I just know, like, my immediate people, but I did not know my grandmother's siblings. I didn't know their family lines. And I was on ancestry.com, and I normally don't reach out to people. This was like only the second time that I reached out to somebody because I saw her family tree and it matched mine and it was correct. And it was my grandmother's brother's granddaughter.
Oh
So we're
wow.
both granddaughters of siblings. That's how I got that picture.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. That's really really something. Wow.
That was so,
Wow.
like, mind blowing. And really, so I mean, I have to thank you because it was because I kept asking and looking and just kind of being determined and not wanting to give up. And we spoke, and I found out that I have 8 cousins that I knew nothing of. She didn't know I existed. I didn't know that she existed. And I was telling her I've never seen the picture. And she said, "Well, we grew up and we always had the picture." And she literally sent me the picture a few days later, and she just texted to me on my phone.
Wow.
And I was blown away that this was something that I never thought I would see. And I got it.
Right. That's
The
unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And
So
now you have new
anyway,
family. You found
yeah,
your family.
yeah. I mean, and to like pull those links together, they're like, so these are siblings. They come from the same period. These are siblings, and the siblings' grandchildren find each other. That
Mhm.
is something else. That is something
Yeah.
else.
You see, that's why we look at the screens, grandparents, because we can find each other in the screens. The world has gotten so big.
Yes, because there's
We
so
have
much
to
in
find each other
there.
in the screens.
And I think it's important thing of like not giving up. I have been looking for many years. I keep my ancestry.com membership going, and every single time that I feel like, oh, I'm not going to find anything else because I've gone so far, then something like that happens. So,
Mhm.
anywho,
Wow.
Zawadi Powell, a medium, a spiritual light worker, and just an amazing sister overall. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You're
Mhm.
amazing too.
If y'all are interested in connecting with Zawadi, she is at higherassistance.com. And so you can, and she's also on Instagram. We're going to get her to do more Instagramming.
I just got on Instagram, guys. I gave up.
We're going to get her to do more, but you can reach out to her definitely in her website. And she is just an amazing woman that is full of knowledge and really can help folks of African descent kind of walk this journey of being able to connect back with their ancestors. She certainly helped me in a way that I did not believe. Oh, I got to say this by ending it this way. So, y'all, I started out, as why didn't heard me say this 50 million times? I did not believe in mediums. And I met Zawadi and I was like, oh shit, this is real. So thank you, thank you, thank
You're
you. I can't
welcome.
thank you enough.
You're welcome.
Careful.
Thank
Oh,
you.
look at like Ifa said, yes, Zawadi is amazing. See,
Hola, Ifa, you are amazing as well. Thank you for everything.
so everyone, I am here every single Friday at 12 o'clock, hanging out, talking to different amazing people. And so, Zawadi, hope you come back. Talk to
Yes,
you again.
absolutely.
Yes. All right. Take care.
All right. Peace and blessings, everyone. Alafia.
Bye bye.